That's okay. I just try to check what is going on YouTube. Yep, it works. So because sometime I started and something happens, not okay. So everything is checked. Mm-hmm. So I think we have right time to talk about rules, because we have some people watching us right now on YouTube and we have some people here in the room, and I expect that there are some people who are right in the process of coming to the session. So sometimes it happens. So I'll try to check all the situation and try to support you. So by the way, my name is Елена Malushka. So for today, I'm your moderator. And if you have any technical or any other kind of questions, so I'm at your disposal. So you can write here in the chat. So you can write to me personally, as I am the organizer, or you can write just in the chat to everybody. You can even write the name of the speaker. So if you would like to address this question to the speaker, or by the way, if you are the watcher on YouTube, so you can write on YouTube. So, and I'll try to pass this question to the room. It doesn't matter because I control all the screens. By the way, there are two screens here. I have the screen with my room, and here I have the screen with YouTube. So I have two screens both, and I see them quite well. So, and by the way, as for the rules, when we have the speaker speaking, we don't expect anyone to interrupt. If you have a strong will to just to talk or comment or anything like that, or you have a question, or you have a kind of proposal, you can raise your hand. By the way, you have this button right in the bottom of your screen. There is a kind of raise your hand, or by the way, you can have an emotional reaction right in the participant section. And by the way, you can choose like green tick, for example. And I understand that we have some people who are wishing to just to take part. Or you can write, for example, your question right in the chat, asking, can I ask this question in voice? Or you can just write the question and I can make it voiced. It doesn't matter, okay? So, and if you're not really experienced in English, it also doesn't matter, because I can translate, and the rest of the participants also who are quite proficient in English and in Russian, they can help. That can help you to do it. Just don't be afraid, don't hesitate, just write and we'll try to find the reaction. And if there will be a difficulty how to make a question, you can write it in Russian and then I'll make it in English. It doesn't matter also. Okay, so when we have our speakers presenting, I usually mute all the other participants. So don't be careful and patient till the speaker finishes, and then I'll invite you to take your part to ask questions. So, and by the way, today we have really not long session, because we are usually short of time and we all are piled in piles of work, especially distant work. So we all are busy and tired of this. So I don't like you to sit still for a long time in front of your screen. And for today, we have only 3 speakers and me as a presenter, as a moderator that helps you to do everything. So today we have 3 reports and 3 different speakers on 3 different topics. We have, by the way, a special guest. You see all of us here. We have our special guest, Pol Fинnerti. You're welcome. You're our desired guest for today. And by the way, I'm really glad to see you in person because I have heard a lot about you from my colleagues. They introduced you, but we have never talked. So it's our first meeting. By the way, for those who don't know Paul, he is from England, from Manchester, and now he is teaching in St. Petersburg. Am I right?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Me too. So, and by the way, he's an English teacher. Real English teacher, and English teacher trainer. By the way, teaching teachers trainer, it's really very important because if you have a teacher, it doesn't mean he or she is trained enough. And we have to develop, to train, and to do everything to make the teacher more qualified. And sometimes just to help in some aspects. Sometimes just to direct, to write, or just to write trend, I think. And by the way, Paul has more than 10-year experience in teaching English for academic purposes. That means a kind of professional teaching. General business, accounting, legal, and engineering English. So you see how many profiles he has. And by the way, he has an experience of UK university pre-sessional courses. So you see that you can ask some of the questions concerning this topic if you have a kind of that. So we also have Alexander Yakovlev. He is a teacher at Lyceum number 9. By the way, I think you know him quite well if you have ever attended our sessions. He is an English teacher, and he is specialized in projecting, so in making projects, in organizing a lot of project activity. I think it takes a lot of time, and I'm really inspired by this fact. Oksana Maletina is my colleague, my co-worker from Volgograd State University, and he is a teacher of, sorry, I invite all the people all this time. So sometimes you see that my eyes just go somewhere from the screen and from you. Just don't be afraid. It doesn't matter because I try to invite people. So Oksana Maletina teaches English. So most of us are teachers of English. That's why our session is in English. But some of us teach some other languages. For example, we can teach French, Chinese, German, and other languages if we are specialized in it. Most of methodology can be applied to other languages too, because most of all language teaching is quite similar. I mean the basis. Of course, we have different grammar, we have different phonetics, different vocabulary. It's really different. But the basics is pretty the same. And some of the projects, some of the events that we can organize can be also applied to our language teaching. For example, if we talk about Spanish and here we speak about English, some of the aspects we could use. And I see that more and more participants are coming here. And I see that some participants from YouTube come here. It's a kind of just streaming from YouTube to here and from here to YouTube. So by the way, we have the recording and we have translation to YouTube. And so it's quite okay. So I offer you to start our today's webinar. You remember about the questions. I repeat for those who have just attended us. When we have speakers presenting, we don't interrupt and we place our questions right into the chat. Or we, for example, we press the button, raise a hand. Those who work or study in Zoom, you know, you have this button right in the bottom. Usually it's right bottom, right into your right bottom. You can, for example, you can use a kind of emotional reaction into participants section. For example, green tick, I offer you this kind of. In this case, I understand you want to ask the question in voice. And if you write into the chat, I understand that you want me to read this question or to translate it. And if you are afraid or if you worry about it or any other difficulty you feel to ask a question in English, you can write it into Russian, or you can, for example, voice it in Russian, and then we'll try to help you to translate. It doesn't matter. So now I I'm glad to open the session and to start it. So Paul, please take your speech. I offer you to start our session.
Okay then, Yelena. So hello to everyone, nice to see you all. And please tell me if there are any issues with the connection, if you can't hear me, etc. So first of all, I'm going to share a screen with you. So give me a moment to do that. And just let me know that you can see my screen, the one that I'm sharing. Okay, cool. I'm just going to put it in slideshow. A little bit of a delay. If you just give me a moment, you know what Zoom and the and computers are like. So just while we wait for that to warm up for a second, I'll tell you a little bit about me. So as Yelena said, I'm working in St. Petersburg at the moment. Actually, 2 days ago, I celebrated my 1-year anniversary here. So I've been here just over a year. Also, I've been working as an English teacher for 10 years approximately. That includes working in Portugal, Italy, and now obviously I'm in Russia. So in terms of the jobs I've done, for the most part, it's been like an English teacher. And as Yelena mentioned, I've worked at university pre-sessionals as well as some summer schools. And in recent years, I've moved more towards teacher training as well. So often I give webinars and I run sessions for some teachers. But as you might know, because of the current world situation, it's not possible to do that in person at the moment. So lots of things are happening online. I'll just say a little bit about my kind of my core principles in English. So I like to design courses focused on students' individual needs. So I'm not really a fan of course books or textbooks. So I prefer to create my own materials or use authentic materials. So that's something that I'm really into doing. And today we are going to talk a little bit about teaching approaches. So I will tell you that some of the terminology that I introduced, maybe you know it, maybe you don't know it. So if there's a moment where you're not sure and you want to ask a question, please do feel free to ask a question, because I understand that we've only got short presentations and there's going to be a lot of information that I'm trying to present in that short amount of time. So if there's anything, please don't hesitate to let me know. Okay. So just to clarify that you can all hear me clearly and that I'm understandable. Is everything okay? Okay, good. So let's get on with it. Hopefully now it will let me go into presentation mode. So if you'll just be patient with Zoom and PowerPoint. There we go. Okay. So the focus of my presentation today is keeping students engaged by using a range of teaching approaches. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, so in terms of what's going to happen in this presentation, this is the outline. So first of all, I'm going to touch on why it's important that you use a variety of teaching approaches. Then we'll look at 4 teaching approaches and see how they work, then evaluate the pros and cons of each of these approaches, and then finally look at situations in which we can use each approach. So that's the focus of today's webinar. So first of all, the first question, of course, is what is a teaching approach? Okay, so teaching approaches are often based on your experience as a teacher, but also very importantly, your beliefs as a teacher. What do you think works well and what do you know works well? So just to kind of summarize what this is, it could be the way that you prepare a class or deliver a class, how you organize activities for students to do, the role of the teacher and the students. So is the teacher more the focal point? Do you give students more of a role? Do you like pair activities, group activities? In what order do you like to organize your activities? And teaching approaches may be the same or different, whether it be a whole course. So we're looking at a syllabus. It could be a 1 semester syllabus, a month-long syllabus, or even an individual class. So this is what I mean when I'm setting the context of teaching approaches. Okay. All right. So I will let you know, Elena, that while I'm presenting this, I can't actually see the chat. So if there are any questions, just let me know, and just
I'll help you in the end.
Feel free to interrupt me if there is an urgent question in the chat, because as I said, in presentation mode, I can't see it. Okay, so I'll continue. Okay, then, so the question is, why should we use a range of teaching approaches? So some people argue that a routine and way of doing things means students get into a rhythm and they know what to expect and they come to every class and they're ready to go. But I think in some ways we can look at it in a different way. So why should we vary things instead of doing everything the same way every time? So first of all, I think variation keeps students interested and engaged. I remember when I was a student, when there was something a bit different, a bit new, it always got my attention a little bit more than saying, oh, okay, today we're going to do reading and then talk about it, and then I'm going to write something. So if that was the same every lesson, it was a little bit boring. So I think that a bit of variation always helps. And remember that in your classroom, you have lots of different student types. You know, we could be talking about personality, you know, introvert, extrovert, those who like speaking, those who like writing, those who learn visually, those who learn audibly. People who like to be quite meticulous and planned, people who are spontaneous, cautious, experimental. Some students like to experiment with language, some students like to use language they're comfortable with. So we're trying to cater to all of these needs. Another thing is if we don't know what to expect, we're a little bit more active in terms of cognitively, emotionally, we're more engaged. And then what it also does is think about it this way. If you always do classes in the same way, how can you be sure that that is the best thing for the students? All right. So think about, try and do things in different ways. And you might see that actually for the group as a whole or for individual students, certain activities and certain ways of doing things works better. So it's very important at the start of any course that you try different things so that students are able to see different ways of doing things, and also so that you can identify what works best. Okay. And of course, we're talking about an e-learning context. And I think Elena touched on how it can be quite tiring and to sit in front of a computer screen a long time. So I think it's also very important, especially in an e-learning context, to kind of keep students engaged. Okay, so here are the 4 teaching approaches. For those of you that have looked into methodologies, you maybe have heard of these, but if you haven't, don't worry, because I will explain what they are one by one. So we have the absolute classic way of teaching, which people are probably very familiar with, which is PPP, that's presentation, practice, production. TTT, which is task, teach, task. Flipped learning, and then spontaneous conversation. Now, I must admit that I'm a very big fan of TTT. But I would say that at the beginning of my teaching career, I probably felt a bit more comfortable with PPP because it helps the teacher stay in some kind of. TTT is a bit more high risk, but I think it's worth the risk. Okay, so let's have a look at each of these now. Look at the pros and cons. Okay, PPP, what is it? Okay, so it's the most common teaching technique you'll probably find all around the world in an English language classroom. And it's composed of 3 stages. So what happens? First, the presentation. So the teacher says, okay, today we are going to talk about the second conditional. And then they tell you, we use the second conditional in this way. Let's have a look at some examples. How do we make it? And they give you the language and they present it to you. Then after this, there is practice, which usually involves oral drills, or for example, repeat with me or practice some sentences together, and then some written exercises, often to help students practice the language. The final stage of the lesson is called production, and that involves using the language that you've been presented and the one that you practiced a little bit more communicatively in a situation, or using it spoken or written, using the language. So let's look at the pros and cons of this approach. I've tried to be balanced. So the pros of PPP: step-by-step proceduralization of language. Now, some people would argue that it's easier for us to learn things step by step and slowly build. That's one of the strong arguments for PPP. Another one is that when you're thinking of adults, even teenagers, because of the way that things have been done for many years, they expect to be told the language. They sometimes find it strange when the teacher starts asking them things without explaining and wanting the students to explain. So it's an expectation often. You could argue it's better for lower levels because maybe they don't have enough language to be able to do things on their own. And as I said, finally, students are used to it. Now the cons, it's very, very teacher-centered. So the teacher plans the lesson, they're very much in control, and it doesn't really think about what the student needs. It more thinks about what the teacher wants to teach. So the teacher decides, here is a class of 15, 20 students. None of you know the second conditional. We're going to do the second conditional. But what it forgets is that maybe some of the students do know the second conditional, and we should give them an opportunity to show before we simply explain everything to them. Okay, it doesn't test the student's ability to use language without input. It's about memory. So if I tell you how to use the second conditional, 5 minutes later, you're not going to forget it. But when you use English in real life, in a conversation, in the street, whatever, nobody's given you a list of vocabulary and a list of grammar that you can use, and it's come 5 minutes before. You have to use language spontaneously. So it doesn't have this spontaneity. A big flaw of teachers using PPP is that they spend half the class presenting, then they have the exercises, and then they check them, and lots of time is used. And then there are 2 minutes, 5 minutes at the end for production. So the students haven't actually practiced it. So much emphasis is given to presentation and practice that they forget about the production, which is actually what we want. We want to produce language. And again, students may know the language, but the lesson is inflexible. So once I've committed and I've said, right, I'm presenting the language, here are the exercises, it's very difficult to change the direction of the lesson. It's difficult to be spontaneous here. There's no emerging language. And this brings us on to TTT. So what's TTT? Task, teach, task. Some people would call it test, teach, test, but my interpretation is task, teach, task. So what do? You give a students a task without input. So you don't tell them, you don't give them the language, you don't tell them what language is required. You simply give them a task that they need to do. This might be, for example, look at a holiday brochure and decide which holiday you want to go on. It could be look at options of where you, I don't know, where you want to invest your money and choose one of them, discussing it together. So you give them a task and they just simply do it. The teacher monitors and identifies what students can do well, what they can't do so well. So where do they have language problems? And there will be different aspects of grammar and different aspects of vocabulary that they may or may not be struggling with. And you need to decide what do they need. So what do? We've looked at the task and we've gone, all right, my students need to be able to use some imperative commands a little bit better. So maybe I'll touch on that a little bit, all right? Or even before the class, you thought, probably they don't know this set of vocabulary. So you've already prepared in your head and then you're ready to respond in the teach phase. So what do, you provide students with a model of how to do the task. That's usually a pre-recorded model. It can be a written model. It could be a spontaneous model from the teacher. And then you focus on the language which the students struggled with. And then you present and practice the language as necessary. So if they had issues with using a conditional structure, for example, if the task required it, you would probably spend more time on this. If they had problems with pronunciation of particular items, you would probably spend more time in this. And then the task. So you've explained the language, you've given them a model, and then you give them another task, which is similar in format to the first task. So maybe instead of choosing a holiday, they choose an excursion, the same format, but they've been given the language they need, the grammar and the vocabulary, and you've given them feedback. So in theory, they should perform the task better the second time. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of this approach? Okay, in terms of the pros, if you don't feed students language and you simply make them produce it, it shows them where their language gaps are. If they can't do something, they can't complete the task, or they can't access the language, it shows them what they need to study. And from task 1 to task 2, they'll be able to see their progress as well. How have I progressed in this class? In the teach phase, they will notice new language. So your model should show them, look, this is how it's done, and they can compare it with their own. A task gives them an objective and makes the teacher create context. So it's not just a list of exercises, it's a real task. And it focuses on what students need and not what the teacher wants to teach. What are the cons? It's difficult to do with lower levels who may lack the required language. It's new for students. Students often want to be fed language and they may not be used to it, and you may need a bit of time to show them how this technique is useful. From a teacher perspective, it's a little bit high risk, as you don't know what issues students will have and you don't say. And again, in preparation, it could take you a little bit of time to create a model text. So that's another thing in terms of preparation. Some people would argue also it doesn't fit all language, for example, debate. Okay, I appreciate that we've not got so much time, so I'm going to move a little bit quickly. Next one, flipped learning. What is it? So students are given materials to look at in their own time at home. This could be videos, articles, exercises. So they do this at home, and then they come to class and they discuss the materials they completed. The materials could be a topic, it could be a grammar topic, it could be vocabulary, it could be a situation, and the teacher creates activities based on what they've done, with the focus on speaking generally, production. And the classroom time also gives an opportunity for students to ask questions about difficulties they've had at home. So what they studied at home, and then the classroom time can be dedicated to speaking and fixing their issues. Pros and cons. The pros are students do things in their own time at their own pace. In the classroom, maybe you'll find you are rushing students, you're making them go quickly. Some students finish early, some students finish later. It's difficult to kind of manage this sometimes. Lots of students have limited class time. I don't know, 2 hours, 3 hours a week. This class time should be used valuably to help them with what they need, to ask the teacher questions, to use the language, not simply to do exercises. Which again, moving on here, we don't spend time reading and listening, something you can do at home. And the student comes to class knowing the focus of the class, so no surprises, they can prepare. However, some disadvantages. If you have a big group, 10 people, let's imagine 20 people, 10 people did it, 10 people didn't. It could make it difficult for the teacher to manage because they'll have some students who are prepared and some that aren't. So you would need to have really disciplined students who do the work. It's quite high risk because you don't know what questions the students will ask. The teacher's not in control, similar to TTT. And then another thing again about class preparation is the teacher needs to design materials for homework and for classwork. Okay, final point. Spontaneous conversation. Now, some people think, oh, I can't waste my time in class just doing conversation, but sometimes it is useful. So what you do, you tell your students on Wednesday, okay, next class on Monday is going to be a conversation class, so please bring some ideas. They can talk about what they want. Then on Monday, they come to the class, the conversation flows. There's no real control, and the teacher only intervenes when students need help, or maybe to move the conversation to a different topic. So the teacher's a facilitator here, but they make corrections and they give students the language that they need to express what they want. Advantages and disadvantages. On the one hand, students can talk about things interesting and relevant to them. If they are engineers, they can talk about engineering. If they're interested in sports, they can talk about sports. It's useful for them. It lets them feel in control. And then the teacher can give language which is immediately useful for the students because it's something they want to talk about. Cons. At lower levels, students may struggle to express themselves because they lack the language and they want to be given language. Again, if it's an hour-long, 2-hour-long class and the students don't have much to say, it means the class can go a little bit dry and run out of ideas. And again, from a teacher perspective, it's high risk because of unpredictability. So you may have noticed that the PPP, the first one, is kind of the safe option for the teachers, but in my opinion, it doesn't really think about the students. It's an easy option for the teacher, whereas TTT, flipped learning, even spontaneous conversation, it's a bit high risk, but it's more about the students, less about the teacher. Okay, how to choose the approach. I mentioned 4 approaches, all right? So when could we use PPP? Lower levels, perhaps, students expecting explicit teaching. TTT, maybe real life problems, delegating tasks, looking at a brochure, or something where you speak for a long time, where you've got the opportunity to have a dialogue, a monologue, a group discussion. So for example, discuss rules you had as a child. tell a story. And PPT always has that aspect of student-centeredness, okay? Flipped learning, when can it work well? It works well. Imagine you're talking about a grammar topic and it's really long and to explain. You know, you guys know present perfect, for example, has so many uses. But what about if they read at home, do activities at home, and then they already have an idea of what it's about? Then they come to class and they can discuss them. So they don't always need the teacher to explain. Students can read and understand things for themselves. So this is when it's quite useful, if it's a topic they can understand. Anything that doesn't require an absolute explanation from the teacher, trust the students to do it themselves. Spontaneous conversation. I try to do this at least once a month with my classes. So I have 2 classes a week, okay? So I try to do this at least once a month where we just have a spontaneous class. And this will give them kind of an indication of how able they are to just interact in spontaneous situations, okay? So I've given you 4 approaches there, and I'm not saying that one is better than the other. They're all valid in different ways, but the key here is that you use different ones interchangeably, so you're adding a little bit of variation to your classroom so that not everything is always the same. So that's the main message I want to give you, is that you should vary what you're doing in the classroom. Okay, here is just a little references page in case you want to do a little bit of further reading. I referenced some of these authors in my presentation. And then finally, if you've got any questions, I'm happy to take them now. So thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry if I went quite quickly at the end, but I do appreciate we have time constraints. So feel free to put some questions in the chat or ask them. I'm ready to take them.
So we have a question from Victoria. Victoria, would you prefer to ask it in voice or I should read it?
In my opinion, this is a very interesting report and presentation. Thank you, Paul. I would like to see it, of course, in the practice. And Paul, do you conduct any master classes?
So you mean like, would that be master classes for teachers or for students?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, if you're considering a master class as some kind of teacher training, maybe. If we're thinking about teaching students skill that is maybe not necessarily English, so you could teach students how to play a card game completely in English, or you could teach students, you know, how to perform a particular skill if it's in English, if that's what we're talking about. Yeah, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that if it's a real skill. I can see Victoria's question in the chat.
Yeah.
I can answer that directly if you like. So she said, can we use these methods for school children? I don't see why not. So so with your school children, maybe they are used to you giving them language and then using it and practicing it, but there's nothing against you giving them a task at the start of the lesson, kind of without input, letting them what they can do. And if you look at what they can and can't do, it puts you in a better position to fix their problems and focus on more on what they really need. Are they universal for everyone? Now, the point of these is, I believe in theory, yes, they are universal for everyone. They can be for children, for adults, for different levels of learners, different types of learners. And what we're doing by varying the approaches, giving them, you know, opportunities to do things in different ways. Even with school children, you can do flipped learning. So for example, give them a task to do at home. Maybe they can look at, I suppose with little children, it's going to be more vocabulary based. Maybe give them some new vocabulary. They work with it at home, and then when they come to the classroom, they will already know it, and you're going to try and use activities which help them practice it. And then you don't lose 15, 20 minutes explaining the language to them. And then in terms of favorite approach, now I must admit that if I want to focus on a specific topic, I do like TTT, task, teach, task, because as I mentioned in the presentation, it's something which I think is more student-centered and allows us to really focus on their needs. Although I do appreciate that from time to time with certain topics, PPP can work, but I think that variation is kind of the key here, you know, a little bit of everything. a question here from Daria.
Yeah.
Okay, so educational institutions say that you have to follow a certain textbooks. So I suppose that the key here is a little bit of adaptation of what do you do with this part of the textbook. So let's try and map those onto the approaches that I suggested. So what you could do here, graph or of the textbook is focus on a specific topic. Okay, so I suppose traditionally it doesn't matter how you do it, but you need to teach them this topic or this type of language. So that can easily happen. Let's take the flip learning. They can look at it at home and then come and discuss it with you, if they have any questions. Alternatively, you can simply, as the teacher, stand at the front of the class and explain what's in there and what the target is. That would be PPP. Another way, for example, you're looking at this paragraph and then you say to the students, okay, why don't you tell me about the language in a task? Yeah, it would take a little bit of preparation time from the teacher, but you're going to take the topic from that and you're going to design some kind of task which makes the students speak and do something spontaneously. And then they do that. And then you can look, okay, what do my students know? What don't they know? And then when they come to this, mandatory paragraph of the book, well, the ideas are going to be already there. Let's imagine that the mandatory paragraph, let's just say it was talking about, I don't know, public transport. Let's imagine it's that. So before the students look at this paragraph, you're going to give them a task which forces them to talk about public transport. It could be, you are members of the local council and you are thinking about making improvements in all areas of your public transport network. So why don't you have a meeting? You are the CEO, you are a local politician, you are a passenger, you work in the train station. You think you can improve it. So you're giving them the opportunity to express what they know already. And then maybe the text is going to throw some vocabulary at them and give them some ideas. But let's imagine that in that task you did at the start, if they already know the language and that's going to be in the future paragraph, well, that means that you don't need to focus on that language in the paragraph and you can focus on something else which they didn't know or which is new to them. So I think giving the students a bit of control is always helps to enliven things and really to because I think students come to the class and think, oh, we're looking at the paragraph again, and then they're using the paragraph to check. Well, maybe that could be a different approach,
Thank you. So any other questions? So sometimes, okay, we have a new question from Victoria. How do you involve your students to study?
Well, I suppose that ideally all students are involved in all classes. So I think the key is involving students means that the teacher a little bit of a back seat. It means that the teacher is not always the focal point. So you got one teacher, 10, 15, 20 students. If everything revolves around what the teacher says all the time, well, that's not really involving the students. That's just a teacher show. So what we want to do is make students do things with each other, and they need to understand that working with each other is just as productive as working with you, because you as a teacher, they'll have a group activity to do. You're going to monitor what they're doing, and it's just as valuable as them listening to you. They can listen to each other, they can speak to each other, they can do activities with each other. And then I think the key with involvement is if it's interesting and engaging for the students, that will involve them. And involve, like I said, involve means don't speak at them, speak with them and give them an opportunity to interact with you, with each other, and to do things on their own, not all the time with you.
So thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yep. From the listeners. So I see that someone is writing. And I'm waiting for some time. So by the way, it's a kind of not question, but usual comment from myself. I usually tell to my education students, the students that will be future teachers. They are future teachers right now, and they are going to be teachers in future. And I usually tell them that they need clear task. If you have some downgrade in motivation, sometimes it's connected with not clearly set task. You told about tasks also. So do you think that tasking in the very beginning helps motivation? Because not all people agree. They say, oh, it's just the problem in teachers, they are interested, or they say this is the problem of students because they are not interested. But sometimes it's a question of tasks. They are not clear, maybe.
Okay, so taking kind of the two questions of the importance of tasks and whether tasks should be clearly explained. I'd say, well, first of all, the task is key. It provides motivation. So how would I rather learn the first conditional to give advice? Would I rather just do a list of exercises and read a text? Or could it be more interesting to actually create a context in which I need to give people some advice, you know? And I think it always gives an objective and it gives a real life application. So number one, I think the task is vital. And in terms of not understanding the task, of course, instructions are very important. And with lower levels especially, I suppose the key is make the instructions as simple as possible. So always make the instructions as simple as possible. Always do a little bit of a demonstration. So even if they say, yes, I've understood, one question never to ask in the classroom, never say to your students, do you understand? Because they will always say yes. So I think the key here is you can check they've understood by saying, okay, so do you need to do both of you ask questions, or does one of you ask questions and one of you answer? Okay, then okay, so maybe, I don't know, Dave and Maria, can you give an example of what we need to do? Give a little sample. Okay, so before you start this task, always, okay, slow explanation, check with a few questions, get an example, and then monitor. If you find that they're not understanding what to do, stop again and go, okay, guys, let me tell you again, this is how we do it. And I think as a teacher, we can never blame our students if they don't understand our tasks, because it's our responsibility to make it, you know, to make it work.
So it looks like one of my Chinese groups last year, they usually like that. Yeah. Do you understand? Yeah. Do you know the task? Yeah. And they do something. It doesn't matter if they right or wrong, they are doing because they are afraid if they tell me that they don't understand me, it caused something bad for them, and it's pretty funny. The same concerns Russian students when I ask them, do you understand? They, why aren't you doing anything? We don't know what to do. Oh my God. Sometimes it looks like that. Okay, and we have, I have on my WhatsApp questions. So you see I'm multifunctional. I have YouTube, WhatsApp, VK, all the time trying to pass the questions here. And we have a question from Irina. What makes your students more motivated when studying the subjects suggested in the curriculum? So how to improve them? Maybe you have some hints?
Yeah. I suppose it's a kind of an extension of what, who said it? Daria said, in that you have prescriptive tasks that you need to study. And I suppose, well, if the textbook says, read this test, find the vocabulary, complete the exercises, well, you don't need to do it exactly as the textbook suggests, because the key is, as long as you're covering the material. So if the content of this particular material is, for example, let's just imagine it's public transport and giving suggestions, they could be the two language functions. Well, you don't have to just do the activity in the way that the textbook wants. You can take what you think is useful from that page of the textbook, that's if you use a textbook, and then you can adapt it, or you can create some activity to go before it, something that generates discussion. You could maybe adapt the text, you could ask the students to adapt the text. You can basically, I would say, to make it interesting for students, it's let them be involved in the learning process. Don't simply follow the textbook, because think about it. I mean, if you're just going to follow the textbook, well, they don't need you, do they? They can do that themselves. I mean, even someone who doesn't speak English can tell them what to do. So I think like the key is like, don't rely on the textbook. Like I said, even if you've got 2 pages, but let's imagine the ultimate objective is learn public transport vocabulary and different ways to give suggestions. Well, that's in your head. You're like, okay, that's my objective. It doesn't matter how you transmit that and put that across. You can use the text in the class, but maybe you can do other activities and then let them look at the task for homework, or even before the class, you can tell them to look at the text and then do something a bit different in the class. Because I must admit, yeah, a lot of textbooks are a little bit boring. So I think the key is to try to make it a bit more interesting yourself. Of course, it requires preparation time, but I think for the benefit of the students, that's, you know, necessary. Okay, I've just seen the extension question.
Yeah, she just wrote a bit later because she sees the translation. She watches the translation on YouTube and it has a kind of 5 seconds delay. And she wrote this extension just right after I asked you. So it's like a question after question. She talked about the age non-related aspects. If it's, for example, older or younger.
I mean, I've seen it before where you've got kids and in your classes and they're giving them a topic like the how to save the environment, or for example, the advantages of different education systems. And you're like, come on, is that really going to be interesting for, I don't know, even teenagers and things like that? So I think that, again, we have to decide, what does your curriculum want? Does your curriculum want them to understand how the British and American school education systems work? Or does your curriculum want them to learn some vocabulary connected to school, some vocabulary connected to education, and perhaps a grammar point? Off the top of my head, probably this would be contrast, you know, using contrast phrases. In the USA, students study in elementary school and what do they call it? High school, whereas connector, in the UK, often there are 3 stages of education. So again, so you're looking at this, that's the grammar, the contrast or the education vocabulary. And then maybe instead of following the boring text or the boring topic in the book, you can give the students a bit more, I don't know, opportunities to be creative. Let them design their own school rules. You want them to use the vocabulary. It's the same vocabulary. It's the same kind of grammar point, but you can just adapt the materials so that they take out what's necessary. Because come on, are they going to go? Is it useful for them to know all of the names of the exams and the different ages at which people do things in the UK? No. What this task is really trying to give them is the language point through a topic. So yeah, pull out the language point and make it interesting in your own way.
Okay, thank you. Still we have no updates on questions, and I had 2 more questions, but I think I'll let them till the end of their speaker's presentation because they are mostly common to all of the speakers. So I let all the speakers have their presentation, and after that we have a kind of roundtable question because it's mostly common. And these are very, very just urgent present day questions because we are mostly just piled with this question and we are pressed with it. So if we have no more questions right to this date, and yep, so I have questions here, but they are not but they don't concern our session. So if we have no more questions right now, so I offer the next speaker to take part. And then if you remember anything special, by the way, there is a person who remembers anything special, Alexandra. So if there are no instructions and other manuals you can give as a future real life approach, so what should we do? What's the best way to expand students' vocabulary in this case? Students' vocabulary is mentioned here.
So shall I take this question before moving on? Okay. There's another manuals you can give as a future real life application. What should we do? Okay, I think there's always, I would say, first of all, maybe there's no instruction in your materials to do that, but I think as a teacher, we are creative people. And I think there's always a way to make something have some kind of application. I mean, I would like to believe if you give me any grammar topic now, I believe I could think of a context in about 10 seconds, 20 seconds. I believe I can do that because we are quite creative. From one of my teacher trainers, they always said, you need to wear 2 different hats. They said you need to wear your teacher hat, but sometimes you need to take off your teacher hat and you need to wear your user hat. And you go, okay, I'm not teaching this. Okay, this is how I teach this language, but how do I use the language? And as you guys, as good speakers of English and even in Russian, you think, okay, so instead of going, all right, what is the first conditional? I think to myself, okay, when do we use the first conditional? Okay, so again, I always use, for example, giving advice, stating fact. Okay, when can I give advice? Okay, give advice to people when they travel to different countries. Oh, come on, that's way more interesting than just a list of grammar questions, right? If you say to me, okay, but what about teaching possessives to youngs, to low levels? And you go, okay, possessives. Okay, what can I do to create a situation? Let's imagine that you're, you were on an airplane, and suddenly you had to evacuate the airplane, and they brought all of the luggage, and they brought all of the coats and the jackets, and you had to say to the people in the airport, this is mine, this is his, this is ours, this isn't mine. So that would be, you create any kind of real life application, and you can add in the grammar or vocabulary there. So I would say that there's always some way in which you can try and create a context for this language to operate.
By the way, I think that it's a kind of motto for every teacher, that you shouldn't take anything as not yours, because I think, by the way, it concerns somehow the question of Polina about how the young teacher gains credibility. So if you all the time try to put everything aside and take as not yours, one day you find that you lost some connection with your class or lost connection with your profession, because you just lose some interesting aspects of your life, because it's not challenges that makes your life different. I mean, difficult. It's challenges that make your life more interesting, because I wouldn't be mine if I once decided not to take these challenges as a challenge and moved forward. And I think most of us who are teachers and professors and, for example, associate professors, there are different kinds of teaching staff and listeners and students. So we wouldn't be teachers like we are right now if we took challenges as difficulties and just decided, oh, it's difficult, we wouldn't do it. Oh, he doesn't understand. Oh, he's a bad student. And it's a kind of unsolvable question in this case. And what about Polina's question? So I think we could place this question till the end, when we will have a kind of roundtable session. And I think we have some people who can also answer this question, how to make a young teacher credible one. So let's stop here on discussion and questions to Paul first. Now let's turn to Oksana. Then we'll come to Alexander, and in the very end, we'll come back to questions, and you'll be able to ask and answer questions. So, by the way, if you have some comments, so you see there are a lot of questions here, and for example, if you want to comment on any question, you as a listener, so you can do it. So you are invited to do it right in the very end. So, Oksana, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you. Nice to meet everyone. And the demonstration of the screen. So as you can see, the topic of my report is webinars as a form of teachers training under COVID-19 conditions. So the history and reality. Sorry. As you know, our world is trying to find a cure against COVID-19, but scientists need more time to investigate this virus and find a magic drug which will save the whole world. But while there is a struggle against the virus, countries are taking different measures to stop spreading the disease. And one of such preventive measures is distant learning. Teachers, professors, assistant professors, senior lecturers, and of course students have faced different problems while learning distantly. We have to use e-learning or distant learning because we can't have ordinary classes at schools, colleges, and universities. And teachers also need to share their experience with other teachers and learn something new in the sphere of education. I'm going to speak about the history of conducting webinars at Volgograd State University and, of course, the reality. Our first webinar was held in March 2013 with the use of free Skype technology, which doesn't impose too high system technical requirements for participants, since it requires the following: the internet connection at a rather low speed, headset, webcam for a desktop computer, camera and microphone. Camera and microphone are already integrated in laptops and tablets. But during this webinar, so you can see the interface of Skype technology. But during this webinar and subsequent annual ones, there were difficulties precisely because of the difference in the speed of the internet connection in secondary educational institutions. And also, sometimes the speech of the participants in the webinar was delivered with a delay and pauses in sound. Due to the broadcast from the laptop, only the speaker was visible on the screen at the university, and other discussion participants were not visible. The university had practically no difficulties with conducting webinars, since the moderation was carried out by a university technician having special education. So teachers' participation in the webinars had the opportunity to present their reports and discuss issues with colleagues without any problems. However, the significant drawback of this technology is the limitation in the number of participants, no more than 50. Our partner in conducting a series of training webinars are the Committee of Education, Science and Youth Policy of the Volgograd region, gymnasiums number 5-1, license 8-9, Volgograd State Academy of Postgraduate Education. These educational institutions are our location sites for webinars, as their technical equipment can provide high-quality connection. In 2014, in addition to holding a webinar with the teachers from gymnasium number 5, Skype technology was used to hold a scientific session for school children, where the results of their research work were announced during the scientific conference. It should be noted that the use of Skype technology allows not only to hear participants, but also to exchange questions and demonstrate the results of their studies in the form of presentations and video clips. All this makes the discussion lively and contributes to the creation of the presence effect. This form of conducting webinars creates an inclusive environment for students with disabilities, since in previous years technical facilities did not allow involving students with almost complete lack of physical activity, but with retained intellectual abilities. Between 2014 and 2017, we began to conduct 2 events a year using Skype technology for students during the scientific session of Volgograd State University and for teachers to improve their skills and share experience. The main difficulty that we encountered was the limitation in the number of participants and problems with the internet connection, because more participants caused more problems in the work of the Skype program. During the first webinars held with the Skype technology, the organizers needed the help of a technical moderator. And then from 2014 to 2017, the host of the webinar took on these functions. So there was some independence from the technical support service, since it only had to provide webinar organizers with the internet. In 2018, we switched to the use of the editorial webinar platform with free technical support for the entire rental period, which is paid monthly by Volgograd State University. You can see the interface of this platform. On the one hand, the transition to a webinar platform allows you to increase the number of participants, which can be more than 150 people. On the other hand, the technical requirements for participants who want to make presentations and ask questions inevitably increase. Despite the increase in technical support requirements for such events, the functionality of the editorial webinar platform is much wider than the capabilities of Skype technology. So you can see the advantages: landing page constructor, reports and analytics, patterns of rooms, email newsletter service. Types of webinars, so you can have 2 presenters at the same time. Management of participants, participation from mobile devices, banners and branding. In April 2018, we used the editorial platform for a webinar for the first time, as this platform has more functional advantages compared to Skype technology. The webinar was moderated by a highly qualified specialist with a degree in physical and mathematical science. At first use, there were difficulties due to different technical facilities, and namely, lack of the latest versions of Google Chrome and Mozilla Firefox, lack of Adobe Flash Player version 12, insufficient internet connection speed less than 100 megabytes per second, operating system lower than Windows 7. After the first webinar, with the use of the editorial webinar platform, we tried to take into account the difference in technical facilities by informing the participants about certain technical requirements, without which participation in this webinar is impossible. Due to the successful use of the new webinar platform and the high demand for continuous distance education, we began to increase the number of webinars per year. At the stage of increasing the number of webinars, we faced the problem of identifying fields of interest for secondary school teachers in Volgograd and Volgograd region, as they represent the main audience. Thus, Alex Yakovlev, a teacher from lesson number 9, and we worked out a questionnaire for an electronic survey of teachers in which 118 teachers took part. So there is an example. So some questions from this questionnaire. So for example, how often do you use ICT in English classes? What role can ICT play at the English lesson in the modern world? What educational and methodical complex do you work with? And etc. So there were about 18 questions. The received data were analyzed by our assistant professors, Grigorieva Yelena and Shikoldina Anna. The questionnaire made it possible to identify the spheres of interest of secondary school teachers, the webinar participants, which included the following topics: modern information and pedagogical technologies, 30%. Educational models of English-speaking countries, 15%. A foreign language lesson as a meta-subject, 17%. Distance learning courses, 28%. Techniques for building a modern English lesson, 10%. The spheres of interest of webinar participants you can see just presented in the figure. This survey identified the topics of subsequent webinars that meet the interests of the target audience. And we just had our events, which we hold annually. For example, we begin in September, October, and you just can see them on the screen. All Russian webinar, a series of all Russian webinars. So, for example, practice of using basic pedagogical models in teaching a foreign language and other humanitarian subjects. So we have them many. And then the practice of holding webinars at Volgograd State University, the target audience of which is teachers and pedagogues of different educational institutions, has demonstrated the undoubted advantages of the use of smart technologies for advanced training of specialists. In particular, webinar participants have the opportunity to master the educational program of interest without interrupting the work process and at a convenient time for them. Webinars are effective in training and sharing scientific experience among schools and university students. In March, we faced another problem under COVID-19 isolation when we needed to conduct our regular events, but we didn't have a platform. We began to use the Zoom platform, but we used a paid Zoom platform because it has more facilities. We have managed to use this platform successfully and effectively because it is simple and there are no difficult special system requirements. Sometimes we had problems with the audio, screen demonstration, and also we faced some hackers attacks. But as for me, I like this platform very much because you can organize a conference at any convenient time very quickly. You can show films, presentations, diagrams, tables, and listen to the audio texts. Thus, now we work with Zoom platform very successfully and do not interrupt our activity. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, please ask me.
Dear listeners, if you have any questions or comments or proposal, you're welcome to ask. It's high time to ask. By the way, we have some, I have just found that our translation, so that we have our session on VK, and we have about 72 people have just watched it. Yeah, I just posted the link to the YouTube version, and we have about 72 watchers.
But if you have time, I would like to show you some kind of video presentation. It was created by our IT students, so they're first-year students. Yes, but it's very simple.
So I think we have some time. By the way, people are trying to understand if they want to ask questions. We have a couple of minutes.
Just a minute. Which one to choose? Can you?
We are waiting for demonstration to start up.
Can you see?
Still no?
Still no? Just a minute.
Yep. Maybe the wrong screen? Or the wrong mode?
But now, can you hear? Can you watch?
Nope, still the same.
What is
So
the problem?
I offer you to restart it. Maybe the problem with starting it.
Restart?
Yeah.
Demonstration. But I can't see it on the screen. What to choose?
Whoa. Maybe it's put downside somewhere.
Just a minute. I will try to close. If I do the form. But it.
By the way, Alexander, how do you feel?
Не знаю, почему не показывает, Лен.
Может быть, она спустилась куда-нибудь, нет?
Сюда.
Так бывает, когда запрещаешь, вернее, когда закрываешь презентацию, она просто спускается вниз.
Теперь.
Yep, now it works. Но без звука. Надо, наверное, совместное использование звуком. Не включено.
Это где?
Где демонстрация? Нет, сейчас, по-моему, в настройках, и там есть галочка «Совместное использование звука». Планка с демонстрацией. 3 точечки совместно. Да, вот эта вот планочка, где звук, видео и так далее.
Там чат, записывать запись данных, разрешить участникам скрыть панель, видео, копировать.
Совместное использование звука есть такое.
Не вижу.
Либо когда запускается демонстрация, выбирается окошко, и внизу есть кнопочка «Выбрать», поставить галочку с левой стороны где-то.
Совместное использование компьютера. Звука, sorry. Ну как?
Yeah, it works.
Okay, so that is all. So
It looks cool, I think. Was it a kind of additional task? So it looks really nice.
They prepare all their presentation in this format.
Whoa, looks cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did a good job because we can use it as a kind of ad, as an advertisement of the project. So Alexander, by the way, wake up.
Okay, now hello everyone.
Yeah.
Now today in the educational and psychological sphere, the common concept of technology has come to us with the development of computer technology. Because of it, pedagogy has been looking for ways to achieve good results, working with a group or class, and constantly improving the tools, methods, and forms. In teaching, there are always new approaches and attitudes to the organization of training and education. Okay, this gives me the opportunity to design the result of my personal training activities, and my students at the end reach stage of education. In my classes, this can occur in a variety of forms, summarizing all the work. Many scientists identify the following skills that contribute to a successful mastery of project activities. Now, intelligence, the first, the ability to work with information from text, highlight the main idea, to search for information in the foreign language texts, to analyze information, make generalizations, conclusions, and etc. The ability to work with a variety of reference materials, creativity, and ability to generate ideas require knowledge in different areas, the ability to find not one but several ways to solve problems, the ability to predict the sequences of a decision, and communication, of course, the ability to debate, to defend his point of view, supported by arguments, statements, and etc. Why do we need a method of projects? To teach students independent critical thinking, to learn to navigate the information space, meditate on the basis of knowledge of the facts, the laws of the science, to make informed conclusions, make their own reasoned decisions, to learn to work in teams performing various social roles when the project work which can be presented in oral and written form should be followed, in my opinion, by the following recommendations. Getting to the creation of the training product should comply with certain conditions. First, study the individual abilities, interests, and of course, life experiences of each student. To the theme of the product, to formulate the problem, offer students an idea, discuss it with the students. Okay, now we can see now this slide now, the first now preparation of the project now. For example, the first, form a group of students who in front of it has its own task, allocate responsibilities, take into account the propensity of students to logical reasoning, to the formation of the design of the project work. The second, this step is connected with the search for new, more information, discussion of this information and its documentation, the choice of the product. This can be drawings, crafts, posters, drawings, and quizzes. Some projects are done at home on their own. Others require assistance from the teachers in the classroom. The second of the finished decorated materials should be presented to classmates to defend the product. The performance and presenting of the project is important to analyze the proposed material. So the students can have a special notebook for their projects. And the last the last part, the number of steps from accepting the idea of the product. After all, you will ask me, Alex, what is a product? You told us a lot about the product structure today. What does it all mean? And I answer, a product is an activity to me, the creation of a unique product or service, and thus activities that are undertaken to accomplish difficult activities can't be considered products. Okay, and I would like to show our common project with our American partners from Cleveland.
Hello, this is our site between sister cities. Right now, it is actively used by students, teachers, and people who are interested in international relations. Our website has 5 sections. 2 only are about cities with interesting and relevant information, a gallery, a section about project between cities, and a blog with news. We hope this site is easy to be used by everyone, and we're eager to straighten the twinning relationships between 2 cities. Our team slogan is the following: efficiency and quality.
Okay, now thank you for your attention, please.
Okay. By the way, we have a question from Victoria again. Where do you take your ideas for projects? I think it's a kind of inspiration question.
I think that good Christian high school students can train with their friends, teachers, and expand their knowledge and the practice, I think. And now, for example, language training, communication, and the use of the information technologies and systems in different practice. And I think that the project helps students find a logical chain in the educational process. And show interesting things. What do you know? What can you do? How did you find out? And etc.
So, and there is another question, by the way. There are 2 questions. Where is the middle duration of one project? I think it depends, but have you ever experienced, have you ever measured how long does it take to make a project from the very beginning till the implementation?
Yes, you're right. Now you have different methods in our education organization, and we would like to show different interesting projects. And now, for example, sister cities and etc.
Now a lot, many thanks. By the way, did you know that tomorrow we have a session with Cleveland?
Yes, you're right.
You know, do you come?
Yes, absolutely right. Now,
yeah, preparing.
yeah, prepared.
Yeah, tomorrow it's on 9.
We would like to show now our common informational product and website, and with a center of public diplomacy.
Yeah. I have just got a message from Elena. She has the same name as me. It's not me. She asked me about a place in my office, and I remembered about you and about our project for Cleveland. So, by the way, Daria has some difficulty with attending the session. It's the 3rd or the 5th time she's trying to get in, and all the time she gets out. So, do we have any other questions or comments? Or any kind of invitation, because I tried to check all the sources of questions, but I'm not sure that I have checked all the questions I could. So I see no more questions still. And now I think it's high time to open a roundtable question. So we had an open question from Polina about the development and training teachers, young teachers, I mean, the credibility. So I put this question to all the people here. So how can we help young teachers to develop their abilities, their professionality, how to develop them and how to make them not young teachers or future teachers, but to make them a kind of proficient teachers or qualified teachers. So how can we help them? Oksana, do you have any idea on this?
How can a young teacher gain credibility?
Yeah, so I just copied her question again so that you could all see it clearly.
Probably the young teacher should be very sociable, communicative, and should be very open to all the questions which school children can have. And I think that friendliness will help to gain the credibility of the young teachers, it seems to me, if we take into account their work in school, for example. Not to be very strict.
To yourself or to the students?
To the students, of course.
So, Paul, do you have to add anything about credibility of young teachers?
Or should be very flexible.
Oh, flexibility, yeah.
Yes, just to change to the you have just to take into account the situation and be ready to react in an adequate way. Okay. That's all, I hope.
I think I see where Oksana's coming from, but I guess as she mentioned, it depends on the situation and your students. Because I've always thought, especially with young students, is that first comes discipline and being strict, then comes friendliness. So I found that if they respect you as a teacher and a professional, then the friendliness can come later. So I've always thought that initially, probably at the start of the course, you might be strict, because what you can do, you can become less strict than at the beginning, but it's difficult to start off being friendly and then become more strict. I think it's, and I found sometimes that we're talking about younger learners particularly, that if they respect you, then that means when you are friendly, it means that they value it and they deserve it. And I don't, maybe a definition of friendly is important here. I mean, of course, you're going to be like approachable and polite and nice. Of course, that's a given. But I think that maybe at the start, I might not be so friendly, let's say, but I would be. And then as the course goes on and they trust you as a teacher, then maybe your friendliness can grow. I mean, I suppose when you talk about university students and adult students, it's probably a different story. I think at that stage, rapport becomes very important because discipline may not be an issue with older groups. I'm thinking more along the lines of if there are potential, let's say, discipline problems with students, I think that's something maybe you have to deal with first, and then later on, I suppose the friendliness comes. But for sure, in a university context, I think that both of them are important because they want to enjoy themselves like the teacher, but at the same time, I think that the fundamental thing is always, do they respect you as a teacher and a person? And then after that, I suppose it's about what about your personality? I mean, that's probably where I stand on the issue, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. And Alexander has just written to me, he has some internet problems. He writes that if a teacher is not perceived as credible, the students just turn off. So, of course, I agree with Paul about politeness and behaving friendly. You shouldn't be really too mild, like you let children do everything they can, but you should be polite, you should be understanding, because your students always know less than you in your subject. They can learn a lot, they can know more than you, in fact, but your subject is usually, you feel more experience in this subject. Of course, they can have some encyclopedic knowledge, but usually you cannot ask them tell you more than they learn. And your task is to teach them. That's why it's hard for you to become really strict. You may just make children not failing you as a teacher, but only as a kind of tester. You just test them and test them and test them, but you don't become a teacher, really, a kind of leader. I think this is the problem we are just talking about. And if you want to be seen as credible, you must build trust in relationship with your students. That's again Alexander. Okay, and we have an idea from Victoria. She supposes that young teachers should try to make all the best, should listen to students and make them listen to you, be adaptive and stress resistant. So we have one more idea on adaptability, flexibility, and understanding. That's one of the most important ideas. I know that there is a kind of approach that young teachers, because they are young to children, they should be always strict, and they should be not approachable. Like they are a kind of castle built of concrete and glass, and you cannot come to this castle. But in fact, it doesn't work. Usually, children, if they feel that you don't, if they feel that you are not really sure about yourself, they will understand you're not sure, and they just understand you. They realize you as a leader. But usually, you should believe in yourself. In any case, you had a lot of years of preparation. You did a lot. You studied a lot. So doesn't it mean that you have a lot of useful information in your head and a lot of ideas? You just need to have some time for adaptation. You need to be flexible, and you should see all the opportunities around you. Whether you see them, you need to apply. It can help, really. And by the way, we have one more question. I just copied from the other messenger. Here it is. Has distant education epoch influenced you? Has it influenced you? Has it influenced badly or in a good way? Have you felt anything changed after we have entered this epoch of distant education?
It's not bad and it's not good. It's just in the middle of it. Because there are some advantages of distant learning and disadvantages, of course. Probably it's better to use mixed learning, for example, because when you stay at home, you will be healthy. When you leave your home, you will just catch this virus. So, but as for me, I prefer real learning at our university. But sometimes it's probably very interesting just to mix it.
Okay. Paul, what about you? Do you feel any change?
I agree with Oksana that maybe a combination of the two, because I think that even taking away the whole coronavirus situation, I think definitely our profession has changed. I think people now have realized that things can be done effectively online. Maybe we were forced into this situation. And I know that Oksana started doing this many years ago in terms of webinars, but maybe I think the rest of the world, the educational world, has realized this can be done online. But yeah, so I think a combination of both is effective. I think I would find that as a general rule, if I have small groups, like let's say my one-on-ones or small groups, yeah, online learning can be rather effective. But I definitely believe that if you have larger group sizes, I think that face-to-face is just more practical and a bit more effective for teachers. I mean, I know some people may have experience of using Zoom and breakout rooms with large groups. But it's kind of in the classroom, it's kind of like you can see everything that's going on and you can hear everything, whereas on Zoom, that's not necessarily the case. And then in a normal classroom, imagine you have a situation where lots of people are talking at the same time, they're doing group activities, pair activities, whereas online doesn't really facilitate that to an extent. So I think that online learning can be useful because you can use lots of multimedia, so photos, images. You've got lots of nice activities you can do online, which are a lot smoother than in person. But at the same time, there are things that you can do offline that you can't online. So yeah, I think we're looking in the future, probably a mix would be quite a nice solution, I suppose.
Yeah, sometimes it helps, especially if you have no other choice. For example, Zoom is quite good in this case if you have a kind of task. So I just give an example because I'm a Chinese language teacher, so it's really hard to have Zoom. It's not really hard to have Zoom. It's hard to have distant learning because you have students that need to write some Chinese characters. And they need just to make a picture to send it to me. I need to show it to everybody and correct them and say, oh, here it's wrong, here it's good, here it's okay, here you should pronounce it like that. It's really good to have Zoom because before that we used any other platform and we do it like that. But in Zoom, they can correct it and they can write it on the whiteboard. But in fact, they use just a kind of mouse. So it's like simple mouse and they try to do it, or they try to do it like this. I try to catch it, but it doubles or triples or so it's difficult. Of course, I'm happy because I have my interactive pen. I have a kind of board. So I'm really experienced in this case. So I'm good here. But they are on the other side because, and that's why it's quite hard because I cannot really assess if it's a kind of mistake of typing or tapping the screen because they just can misplace or cannot really touch this character. Or for example, they don't really understand how to write it. But of course it helps because I see how do they write it. So I see the process. Because when I see just the picture, how do they write it? I'm not sure about the process. Do they write it in a single hole or do they just write the character and then try to do it better, like we do in painting? So we try to improve the picture, trying to paint some additional details so that it looks like the picture. But it's hard, of course. I can agree because if you have Zoom, you have a kind of time lag because you have to wait. You ask the question, you wait for the person to switch on the microphone, because if they all switch on microphone and if they all have a kind of loudspeakers, not a kind of this, not earphones, portable earphones, or just simple earphones. So in this case, if they use loudspeakers, their microphone catches all the sound around. And it looks like they are somewhere in a public place. So it's just hard. For them, they are just having one class. And for me, having 12 hours in Zoom in a public place, and I'm mad in the end. I am, of course, my ears are mad. My head is just bursting out and it's really hard, that's why. So I often ask my students to switch on earphones, to use any pens if they have, to use their phones because it's easier to write on the phone than to use kind of mouse. But sometimes we have internet and we cannot really control internet. We cannot really control computer because we are not gods. We're just teachers. We can facilitate. That's why we have difficulties. And thus I have a question. Have you ever experienced a failure? A real failure or a kind of failure? So it's a question to all of the listeners. Have you ever experienced a failure when you failed at any task while you had remote learning or remote teaching, I think? A failure of your life for this half of the year. So I had, yeah, once I had a class and suddenly my computer just switched off. It has no battery inside. I use my notebook without a battery to save it. And what happened? My house had a cutting of electricity. Okay, I switched on my mobile phone. I use Zoom here, and I just got into the Zoom room and found that I have a shortage of energy here. I found my battery. I put it into my mobile phone. It looked like here. I used the second phone to write messages here as a camera. It looked like that. And both of the phones had a shortage of energy. I had two batteries. At the end of this class, it looked like I had a kind of, I don't know, I have no kind of, yeah, it's not really a disaster. it's a nightmare when you try to do anything and everything fails. And at the end, I had a difficulty of the internet because my mobile phone thought, oh, girl, you're using your mobile internet too often and too much. Maybe you are overusing. Let's switch it off. So I had to go to my menu to switch it on. So these 2 classes were an absolute nightmare. By the way, here we have some students of the time that know it was really nightmare when you try to do everything and everything is going against you. So what about you? Have you ever experienced a kind of failure, maybe of different kind, when everything was against you? Paul, have you experienced?
I think you're right that we can always have technical failures where, for example, the computer decides to update or it freezes.
Yeah.
Connection. As you said, luckily we've got phones and Zoom's quite good on phones compared to other platforms. It's quick, you can get in quite easily. So luckily, when that's happened, I've just gone on Zoom. But in terms of, let's say, you mentioned the word failure, moving away from technical problems, sometimes you design an activity which may have worked well face-to-face and you think it's going to work well in an online format, and then you realize when you do it, actually, it appeared good in my head, but then when it was online, maybe it was a little bit too slow, or because of the limitations of the platform, you couldn't do it in the way that you wanted to. So I think that through, like, even from a, let's say, teaching methodology perspective, you learn that certain types of activities work better than others, and I think that it's but that's the thing, we learn from our mistakes, right?
Yeah, sometimes you cannot just plan this task because you suppose that your learners are ready to do it. But in fact, you try to organize, you try to motivate, so you do everything, but there is really no response. Just everybody is dead. It's nightmare with zombies. Hey guys, I'm here. Do you listen to me? And they, yes. Why aren't you participating in my activity? It's so cool. They, okay, we'll try to do it. But it looks like you're doing something wrong. And you cannot understand what's going somewhere there over screen because you don't really see them. You know about a kind of joke, a kind of picture, a girl on the background. In the background, you have a kind of beach, not a picture of the beach. She's like, "Oh, I'm so beautiful," and this is a camera, a kind of angle, and everything that is behind the screen, behind this angle, is in mad order. It's a mess, a lot of things, and a lot of guys. And by the way, she's talking on her webcam with her boyfriend. Oh, I'm alone. And there are a lot of guys in the background. It looks like that. You just really don't know what's going on. Where are they? What are they doing? It's really hard in this case.
Yes.
By the way, Paul, Alexander is, by the way, Alexander is just experience your difficulty. He's having some trouble with platform. He's writing to me on his WhatsApp. He writes, "Oh, my bad internet. It has low power. It's really slow. That's why I try to communicate." So Victoria, by the way, also have a kind of bad experience. She experienced some problems with electricity, like me. we are sisters, yeah, in this case. But fortunately, battery of my notebook was good, and I had enough time for finishing my lecture. Oh, you're really happy. But when you're at home, you don't expect this nice thing. So I had a lot of energy in my batteries, but it looks like, oh, my battery, I switch it on, you switch another thing, and you try to do it everything, and then you switch on your mobile internet. And when it happens right at the same time, it's really mad. When it's one by one, you can get ready. But it was the only one day when I had like that. Usually I'm really ready. I'm really good at distance learning. But this day was really hard. Oksana, what about you? Your failure.
As for me, I can't just remember such a failure, except electricity.
Maybe a difficulty, yeah.
Yes, probably there are some difficulties when it is the early morning and there are no students in your class. And for example, if they are here but can't answer because of their sleep. So it's just very difficult to to make them be active. So that is the only difficulty. And it's difficult psychologically, because you don't know what is on the other side of the screen, because you do not see their faces, because they do something else, or for example, they are in their beds still drinking coffee and things like that, and trying to just participate in an English class. So it's a real difficulty.
So thank you. In fact, so it was the last question of mine for today. It's a kind of roundtable session, so to involve you into communication. So you see, even experienced teachers who have everything, they are really good, so they know a lot, they are trained. But when you have some situation, sometimes it happens that you cannot get with it. It just happens because you cannot control all the things like internet, life, God, government. It's over your control. So just take it easier. Don't be so, I just don't know, so troubled. It happens, of course. It happens also to your learners, to yourself, to every other person. We all are people, so we should understand each other. By the way, it may help. I usually tell my students about this fact. I'm also a person. So I'm also a human, so I can have some troubles. I can have some difficulty. I can forget about anything, but I try to say it honestly. So if I have some difficulty, so I ask my students to do the same. If they are not honest with me, so it means I can also be not honest, but they don't want to have a dishonest teacher. That's why they try to do the same. And once I had a student who he used another work and he just rewrite it. So he cheated. But then he came up to me and said, oh, I felt so stupid, so I used another work, so sorry. It was so nice. I said, okay, so did you understand anything? He said, yes. So this is the rule. He explained some aspects. So in fact, he knew that, but he was so afraid of getting low grades, but then he felt like, oh, I was dishonest. And he said that my eyes were looking at him like I didn't believe him. So he decided to tell me the truth, not to be noticed. So that to be the first to tell it. So I think it's the last question. If we have no other people, I just check the online session here. No comments. So if we have no other comments for today, I offer you to finish and to continue with the next session a bit later. So I think the next webinar will be planned for about in 2 weeks, maybe. We have we have discussed the schedule, but we haven't planned it before. So it's about 2 weeks. So we plan the next webinar in 2 weeks, and then about 2 or 1 webinar till the end of the year. So it's about 2 or 3 webinars till the end of the year. So one is connected with languages and cultures, so learning languages and language specificity. One concerns camping and sports facilities. So how to organize an activity that is extra activity. By the way, I have a reporter. She confirmed her report. It's language camp. So she's going to talk about organizing a language camp, how it looks like, especially how it looks like to have a camp and you have distant learning around. By the way, they had a successful experience. They had their summer camp in English. And it was held really, yeah. They had a successful experience, so they can share. And as for the last one, nope, it wasn't the last one. I'm not sure. Yeah, we have one more about digital platforms, about organizing online learning. It's like this one, but concerning the technologies. We had in spring, nope, in July, I think. We had in July kind of this webinar when we discuss some technologies and actual tools we usually use in our work. And maybe we had a kind of masterclass. I'm not sure about who is going to master us. It's a kind of short masterclass, but I hope I ask one of my colleagues to do it. It was pretty good to do it. So, by the way, who hasn't registered on Leader ID? So I welcome you to do it after the webinar. And if you have any questions or if you want to contact me, don't hesitate to write to me. All my contacts are on Leader ID. And by the way, at the end of this webinar, I type my email here so that you can write to me and ask any questions. And if you have a question to one of our presenters, I can pass this question to them. Just write whom you address it. Or maybe this question will be discussed next time. So I offer you to finish this day with a good smile and hope for a better day tomorrow, and enjoy your life. As I usually talk to my trainees and to my assistants, by the way, I have 4 assistants. These are student teachers who are trying to get the teacher's degree. And I usually say them, and I usually tell them a kind of story. If you are a teacher, you have a perfect job because you can enjoy it. But don't forget to enjoy. In other case, you will have a nightmare. So enjoy your life all the time. And in the end, you'll feel that life enjoys you. It's maybe the most perfect exchange when you enjoy life and life enjoys you. So enjoy your life and have fun with teaching and with our webinars. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Hope to see you again.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.